So I'm here to explain what exactly this movie was all about. This is the first time I've ever seen this movie. Now, I want to make it clear, I'm not defending everything Zack Snyder does, and I'm not going to trash everything he does. I did like Watchmen, and I did like 300. I never saw Sucker Punch or any of the other movies. But I did see Man of Steel, and I did not like Man of Steel. Most obviously for the reasons that Superman and Lois made out in the middle of 9/11 type scenario. I mean, Superman destroyed buildings, but we'll get into that later. So I'm going to explain what this was all about. This was not a happy story. This was like the Empire Strikes Back of a trilogy, if there ever was one. So for me, it's like, what is the jumping on point? So if you watch the first half of Superman the movie, up to the point where Superman takes Lois out into the night sky, that famous scene, "Can you read my mind?" Up to that point, you could stop and not watch anymore, especially if he just spins the earth backwards and fixes everything like he did twice in Superman and Superman 2, the Donner Cut. And then you get to this one. So this is tinfoil continuity. This is not actual continuity. So if you were to watch The Dark Knight, the first movie, Batman Begins, then The Dark Knight, or actually you watch Joker, then Batman Begins, The Dark, and people don't like that idea, but well. Then you watch The Dark Knight, then you watch the first half of Superman the movie, and then you get to this. So what it is that mankind is introduced to Superman. For how long, who knows? But he's been there for a little while. And then there's this fight between him and Zod, which destroys buildings. Now, what almost took me out of this movie completely, and I watched both this and the Ultimate Edition scenes, is that it was Bruce Wayne's second in command, his vice president. Okay, evacuate everybody out. Now, Cinema Sins had it right in saying, the guy waits until he sees a giant spaceship out there, burrowing a light into the ground, kind of like Nero from Star Trek 2009. And he's like, "Okay, everybody, come on, let's go. Come on, chop, 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 let's go, everybody, come on." And it's like, what the fuck is this shit? Fire that guy immediately. Fire him, okay? So he almost took me out of the movie, but I digress. Let's just move forward. Let's just pretend he doesn't exist. What are you doing, Zack Snyder? So Bruce Wayne sees that there's problems. Now he's got a Wayne Tech, Wayne Corp building in Metropolis because he needs to, make more money. That's what he does. But he sees that there's some alien presence. Now, in Man of Steel, General Zod made his presence known through TV, through breaking the TV and saying, "What is it? You are not alone," or some shit like that. So I know how the story goes. But but whether you look at it from Superman the movie or from the perspective of Man of Steel, which is the proper canon, somehow everybody knows that there's a spaceship and it's going to invade the Earth. What movie doesn't never have in the War of the World scenario where a ship does not invade the Earth? So the ship invades the Earth, invades the city. So he's driving into ground zero. He's driving into this 9/11 scenario where buildings are getting destroyed, people are getting killed. And what it addresses too is that as dark as this movie is, it needed to be dark in a lot of ways to address the problems of Superman fighting the alien robot, fighting the alien despot, fighting the doomsday monster, which we'll get into later, fighting the dangerous thing that destroys buildings. I mean, you're killing people. There was a Marvel comic book way back then about the insurance companies whose job it was to clean up after superhero messes. And that was in the late 1980s. And then there was a show called Powerless with Vanessa Hudgens that addressed the issues of however poorly, about how to deal with superheroes. It was supposed to be an insurance company, then it changed to a superhero product company. It was so stupid. They should have stuck with the first one. So Superman is destroying these things. He's destroying buildings. Now, he gets to go home and lick his wounds. He doesn't help fix the buildings like at the end of Superman 2. He's just, buildings are destroyed, people are dead, but what happens after that? So Bruce Wayne is seeing the aftermath. He's seeing what has happened. And he is seeing that there is so much But could not Superman fix the buildings? Does he know how? I mean, just because you have all these great powers doesn't mean that you're an architect or you're a doctor or you're a lawyer or you're not good at everything. So I'll take for granted that Superman cannot just instantly fix the buildings back. He has to know how to fix the buildings back. Christopher Reeve's Superman could just do it, like, within a snap. He could, like a Thanos snap, he could just do it and it's done. So no problem, no complaint. But Henry Cavill's Superman isn't that smart. He just knows how to use his powers. He knows how to fly. He knows how to use heat vision. I don't know if he ever used X-ray vision. I think he did in Man of Steel. I'm not sure. I don't think he used X-ray vision, but we'll accept that he does. But with all those powers, he couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And from Bruce Wayne's point of view, saying if you want to put your tinfoil hat on and say that he was the same Christian Bale, for some reason he decided to come out of retirement, Selina Kyle steals, because even if Batman's dead, Bruce Wayne, still has to like come back somehow and run the company, or somebody's got to run Wayne Enterprises. So Bruce Wayne comes back eventually, and then after 20 years, and decides to run the company. But if you also look at it from the dark, if you take away the Dark Knight Rises, where he never met Catwoman, or if he did under different circumstances, then he may still been Bruce Wayne, but no longer Batman. But this is a guy who sees what's on the ground, and Superman just sees himself fighting in this video game scenario. So this is the problem. So you have, I don't know, Secretary, something about Zack Snyder. He likes characters with lisps. Michael Shannon's Zod has a lisp, and this woman has a lisp. And it's really weird. But this woman, the secretary for the committee, questions Superman's actions. People are questioning it. You got Neil deGrasse Tyson, who will put you in reality or not. You got people have arguments with him in real life on Twitter, but you have different people arguing for and against Superman. Must there be a Superman? And the secretary says there is, to Charlie Rose. There's different perspectives about this. So you got two different perspectives in this movie. It becomes a talking head point instead of just a courageous Star Wars Episode 4, Superman the movie, Star Trek 2, kind of let's all have some fun, kind of just don't think about the logic. It gets very logical. It gets very cerebral, which is what Zack Snyder wanted to intend. Like, if you were to hear Zack Snyder in the conference room around a water cooler, he would explain this movie probably better than even I can. But to hear his explanations, you could hear it in the movie. Superman has all these powers, but he doesn't assume responsibility for them. He could crush us. He could destroy us. He can do anything he wants. That's dark, actually. And this problem is further definitely addressed in the movie Brightburn. Now, if you look at Brightburn, that one addresses those issues even directly, because this kid is evil. Doesn't really have a logical reasoning to it, but it is that he is evil. And James Gunn made it so. So even though we know Henry Cavill's Superman better than that, even as dark as Henry Cavill's Superman can be, he still fights for truth, justice, and the American way. And this is where I think it's this uncertainty from Batman's point of view. Alfred tries to see the good. He tries to see that Christopher Reeve tone. And he tries to see that, with the extra scenes, we are getting more of a perspective between Alfred and Bruce Wayne. Especially when we deal with Africa. Because Lois Lane's in Africa, you got Jimmy Olsen, who's not really Jimmy Olsen. You can always say it's a fake Jimmy Olsen, but he gets killed. Kind of sad. But what it did was the Ultimate Edition focused on the CIA in a kind of a almost Green Zone, Matt Damon kind of way of, what's the truth and what's a lie. And you have Lex Luthor pulling the strings and making sure, because he knows Clark Kent is Superman. He knows Lois Lane's connection to that, and setting everything up. But obviously it's not a great mystery, so you solve that like in almost half the length time of this movie. You already know it's him. And also the fact that what Lex wanted to do was to kill this god, kill this person. So, we get into Superman destroying drones and making a couple, one or two decisions for the CIA, and just getting in there and saving Lois, saving lives, and making sure nobody gets hurt. But that's about all he does. He just prevents the drone strike, and he prevents Lois from getting killed, taking out the dictator uh, without killing him. And then there's the flamethrower setup that Superman could have burned it. I don't know if forensics could tell the difference between a heat vision. Someone once said heat vision or flamethrower. What would have been the difference? I don't know. Maybe the Zack Snyder would think the audience would know. I don't know if I could know. I'm not a forensic scientist, so I'm not going to pretend. So we go from that to the arguments between Batman and Superman. And Clark Kent gets into the whole Gotham Batman. He does. I mean, the Ultimate Edition scenes show more about how dangerous Batman can be with his branding iron, which was kind of done in the original 1943 serial Batman, where Batman would paint a Batman symbol on people's foreheads. It was kind of racist, but it was a different time, uh, against the Japanese and Japanese internment camps in World War II. But here you see a literal branding iron that um, Ben Affleck has to put on everyone because if they're guilty, and he brands them with the bat just to mark them, which is dangerous when you're in prison because they kill people with the bat symbol on them. So it's like you're almost as bad as a snitch. So you don't have a good time in prison when you have the bat symbol on you. So Clark Kent does not approve of this. Superman does not approve of this. Perry White does not approve of him investigating into it. It's like, just focus on the Friends of the Metropolis Library. Just focus on football event. Focus on a new building dedication. Just focus on the mayor saying this or that. Focus on the economy. Don't focus on this weird shit. So nobody wants to see Clark Kent take on the Batman. So in some ways, that's true. Meanwhile, you have Lex Luthor. Now, I initially hated Jesse's portrayal as Lex Luthor because I was so attached to Michael Rosenbaum. Keep in mind, Michael Rosenbaum, Lex in Smallville is not wrong. It's very, very good. When I think of Lex Luthor, I think of the 90s portrayal of a man in his mid to late 40s, um, very much like very serious, very determined. I would say maybe like, if I could think of an actor right now, probably like, hard to say. There's a lot of dictator type characters, but maybe Ray Fiennes is not a great example. Ray Fiennes is an old established actor, but somebody who looks very old, doesn't look like a young man. You don't think of the scrawny kid that you could beat up on the schoolyard. And yet, when I think of Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, when I think of these internet kids starting their own internet business on YouTube or on social media, when I think of Tommy Wiseau. So if you think of Tommy Wiseau and Elon Musk, if they made it, like Conan O'Brien, if they made it and had a child, this would be Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. This is a kid, the modern day multimillionaire who just acts quirky and crazy. I think it is. I do agree with Ben Affleck's assertion that it's too much like Heath Ledger's Joker, but that's what you do. I think some of Christopher Nolan's influence was in this movie because of the way, the pacing, the direction, the camera shots, the dialogue. It felt very much like Nolan's influence in this movie. So this was like Nolan taking on Superman in this way, the sort of this weird game of chess. Lex Luthor pitting Superman against Batman by having some criminals be falsely branded and framing Batman to be like exerting too much justice. Even having his henchmen or people he pays in prison to kill these bad branded criminals. Pitting a man who was crippled by Superman versus Zod destruction, who was in a wheelchair, he says, fucking not hell, to go to the Senate to speak out, not knowing, and people thought initially that he knew he was doing this sort of for Allah, sort of Al Qaeda sacrifice. the guy in the wheelchair had no idea he was going to get fucked over because, as Lois Lane investigated, he wanted to live. He bought groceries. So Superman, when he went to go and testify to the Senate to explain, to account for his actions, whether it was stopping nuclear missiles, pulling an oil rig, feeding the children, whatever, all these things he's doing, he has to answer to the Senate for that Zod battle in the city and destroying buildings and causing that 9/11 type thing. And the Senate building destroys. And as emo as he has been, as hopeless as he has been, which is the opposite of Christopher Reeve, if you see it in the tinfoil continuity, Christopher Reeve went from being 1978 hopeful and cheerful, which is where I was a baby back then, to where I am now, or at that time when the movie came out, I was about 38, 38 years old. So I'm a more cynical person, way more than when I was a baby. So going from this colorful, hopeful person to a cynical person, it's like he went from being Christopher Reeve to Henry Cavill. If you see the first half of Superman the movie as being the prequel to this movie here, ignoring completely Man of Steel because I just didn't feel emotionally connected to it. So let's see, I'm 16 minutes in. All these conflicts, and Lex Luthor, for him, he wants, this is an insecure bastard with stupid red hair, right? And he wants the approval of the government to approve him. He wants the government to sign off on him being a multimillionaire, doing crazy shit, doing this Elon Musk shit, acting like Tommy Wiseau, acting like Mark Zuckerberg, being this cool guy that, oh, look, daddy looks up to you. So he mentions he has a father. Could be the Gene Hackman type of Lex Luthor. Who knows? But for some reason, you got the son character now being this Lex Luthor Jr. type of guy who just wants approval. And the secretary says no and doesn't give him the funds to get the kryptonite. So he goes over her head to her assistant to get the spaceship to go and to find something. So Lex Luthor is desperate. He's desperate to get any kind of power. Because he just wants power. He doesn't care about Superman. He doesn't care about Batman. I know Jesse tries to make that work, but I don't sense he's as angry against Superman as depicted in the comic books. Now, in Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor, he wanted to know so much more about him that the more he found out about him, the more he felt like this guy could be a problem. And eventually he becomes the nemesis we all know and love to hate to love. But you never sense that. I think that in some ways that doesn't make him great. But if you see it from what I'm telling you, this Tommy Wiseau type that has a lot of money, but he wants more power. To get more power, he has to put these two into check. So what makes him angry against Batman is Batman stole the damn kryptonite that he had. So he was able to get kryptonite, but Batman stole it in the lab. And Superman's this all-powerful being that if he could just kill him or control him, then the government will say, oh, Lex Luthor is this great god among gods. If you just take out the most important thing. For this is just extra credit. This is extra credit. This guy's a thief. So the minute Batman crosses Lex Luthor, this is when he's like, okay, I'm going to do something. Since I know his identity, I'm going to go after Batman as well, because now he's fucking with me, because he wants the kryptonite that I want, that I need. So Batman is trying to steal his power as well. But if he knows that Bruce Wayne and Batman, eventually he figures this out, I think. I don't know. I don't even think he does. No, I don't think he does. I assumed he does because he knows Superman's identity, but not Batman's. But all he can do, since he can't really figure out where Batman lives, all he can do is pit Superman against him. So he uses Martha Kent and Lois to do that. But as I'm thinking it over, Lois does her investigations, with Swan eventually helping out. And so, I mean, there's detective work here, trying to figure out what the truth was. So it's Lex Luthor trying to set up that, between setting up Africa and setting up all these things, it's trying to make him seem like the killer, to seem like the a real murderer. Now, he's not responsible for what happened with Zod. Zod was just something out of the blue. But using the opportunity of Superman versus Zod, the ground zero, trying to instigate a bigger problem. Now, if it was just the destruction of buildings, you could say that Henry Cavill's Superman could fix the buildings. He could pay. I mean, he could gather all the diamonds under the ground. He could make gold out of old circuit. He has super speed. He has heat vision. He could manufacture gold. He can manufacture diamonds. He can manufacture silver or whatever's worth a lot of money. He could find it himself and then bring it back and say, here's all this money to pay for this stuff. So sort of a cheap version of what Lex Luthor does when he just writes a check. Because Lex Luthor could write a check, and maybe he does. I mean, it's possible he does that to sway public opinion, but it doesn't seem apparent that he's swaying public opinion. It's more that he is just trying to just get rid of Superman and then Batman as a bonus. So we get to eventually that he goes into the ship and then accesses all the alien worlds, including Steppenwolf and Darkseid, which is not in the original cut, which is in the final theatrical version. So he creates Doomsday, which is in bullshit logic, So it's sort of like creating the Hulk. If you think of Doomsday like Captain America or the Hulk, because we don't question that, right? Their transformations were immediate or instantaneous, even if Doomsday is capable of way more damage. Lex Luthor has all this unlimited resources and technology to create Doomsday out of nowhere. Wonder Woman comes in to help start the Justice League. So we learn about her origins. We see some chemistry between Bruce Wayne and Diana, between Gal and Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot. And we start to see a little bit of the beginnings of Wonder Woman as the trio go up against Doomsday. And we see this epic battle. The SWAT team, I guess, some kind of SWAT team goes in and gets Lex Luthor, arrests him for attempted murder of Lois, kidnapping of Martha, selling illegal weapons, causing problems and causing an international incident overseas, destruction of property, attempted murder in different ways. So this man is a violation to humanity, and he's in prison. And Batman in the Ultimate Edition, Batman would threaten to put him in Arkham Asylum. And by later on, according to theatrical edition, he gets out with a bald head, trying to get Deathstroke. So to wrap the whole thing up, it's very much a game of chess. This is not a Christopher Reeve type movie. This is not a traditional Batman movie. And yet, to have these two trust each other right away, if the final moments of Man of Steel did not happen, Batman would not already have that distrust. You would have had something similar to Man of Steel #3, written by John Byrne in 1986, where Batman is on the prowl and Superman stops him. But what is happening here? And then we obviously finally see Kryptonite work on Superman or work against Superman. And so at this point now we're just like, we're seeing two people distrust each other already. But Clark Kent does this. He discovers Bruce Wayne on his own. And Bruce Wayne knows that Superman is his enemy, or feels that way. The dream sequence where we see Batman using guns, not just using a grappling gun or some sort of batarang gun. No, he uses, or a taser gun. He uses real firepower to try to stop Superman, who is in league with Apocalypse. There's not even. It's weird though, because it's like, you could argue that the Flash from the future gave him that dream of Superman working for Darkseid and the fire pits erupting from Earth. If you think about it, these two men create their own nightmares. In the case of Superman, he brings about the slow death of Earth, and he came from a planet Krypton that was dying and was about to blow up, and it does blow up. So it was about to blow up when he got sent from Krypton, and then it blows up. And Batman uses guns, the very thing that took his parents away. So Superman brings about the end of the world through the fire pits of Apocalypse, and Batman is shooting at people, which is weird. And then you see the two kill each other. So what it hints at is that, I think most people figured, especially people fans of Snyder, is that this is the foretelling of Superman being possessed by Darkseid to do his bidding and to bring about the end of the world. Now, themes like this run a little bit in a story called Justice League of America, Rock of Ages, that was made in 1997, in which Aquaman, Flash, and Green Lantern see a future 15 years in which Batman is destroyed by Darkseid, which is part of that Justice League trilogy Zack wanted to do, and the sort of the fire pits of Apocalypse on Earth. So there's a lot of things going on in this. Now, I decided I'm going to give this, if you know your sign language, an 8.5 out of 10 and no higher. I don't think it was perfect. I think that if you're used to the comic book Lex Luthor from the 1990s and 2000s, like the President Lex Luthor, this is not that Lex Luthor. He's not that old-fashioned, and he is very different. But he does get the head shaved. That's the payoff, right? And also, seeing these two characters. But see, the thing is, what has to happen is, even though this Henry Cavill is hopeless, after the end of either Justice League, because it happened at the end of Justice League, the Joss Whedon cut, and it should happen, if not there, it should happen at the end of the trilogy, where the last time Zack Snyder directs Superman, Henry Cavill should have the method of Christopher Reeve. Not the look, not the mannerisms, not the impersonation, but the method. Bright and colorful, because after going through a shitty ordeal, after going through hell, now you go to heaven. Now it's almost like the 1978 world, almost. But obviously it's not. So I do now like this movie, where I did not before. I never saw it in theaters, and I was afraid to watch this, but I'm glad I saw it. So while I'm not a fan, I will say, release the Snyder cut. Release it. Thank you.